Bimbo, thank you very much. Your Excellency, the President of Federal Republic of Nigeria, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, SG, I will assure you that my being here is almost a miracle. Because when last I spoke to you, I was not really confident that I will be here. So what I did, just in case I would not be here, was to write something that somebody could read on my behalf, or something that could be screened if recorded on video. So if you will allow me, I will read what I wrote. And then you will take it that I'm not here. Your Excellencies, and my dear brother, SG, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first, let me apologize to you, General Babangida, for not being physically with you this day at this book launch. I don't have to remind you how much I nagged you in your own interest, in the interest of your offsprings, and for posterity to write, to tell what, why, when, where, and how. You can also imagine my pain and anguish when, for larger interests of Africa, that is, looking into the issue of unrest in DRC, I will not be able to be with you on this special outing of yours. This book, the copy of which I have not seen, let alone read, is your story, what you saw, knew, and learned, and what you said, did, or failed to do. It is your action and reaction. It is your deed, good, bad, and ugly. It is your opinion, if you expressed one. Everything in it is you and yours, and not that of anyone else. As I have not read the book, I will not know what you covered or uncovered, what you revealed or concealed. If any. So I am anxious to read the book. One thing is absolutely sure. There will be enlightenment, and we will have written records for history and for future reference. We should be able to glean what lessons and wisdom you acquired with the benefit of the hindsight. There will be one other thing, reaction galore. Again, it will be good, bad, and ugly. But your duty must be due, and you have done it. Now, if I may say that story about your duty must be due. When I was growing up in the village, we had a policeman, uneducated, a sergeant, and he was very good. Not one thing he never liked is pleading. And when you went to him to plead, to show that he was fed up, he will then break into English and will say, my duty must be due. And that is the end of the matter. Your duty must be due, and you have done your duty. You have not only contributed to history making, you have contributed to documenting history. It is an important part of our nation building to keep accurate records. Please, don't be unduly worried about critics and pull him down syndrome. It may even be an indication of success, but take note of objective criticism. A chronic critic of mine, the late Tunji Braithwaite, may his soul rest in perfect peace, condemned a book of mine, and when asked if he had read it, he answered in the negative. He said he had not read it, and said that once Obasanjo was the writer, it must be condemned. I laughed it off. You may be victim of such criticism and such character. Ignore it and remain unruffled and remain friendly with such critics. It's all bad belly, which you must be able to understand and accommodate as a leader, particularly at this stage of your life. That I am not physically with you does not mean that I am not spiritually and psychologically with you. My dear young brother, what next? You have written a book. It is Babangida's story. The book will be reviewed, read, quoted, praised, and lambasted, as some will agree with you in part, and some will disagree with you in part. Some may even wholly disagree with you. Why should you write the book? It is self-glorification, they will say. Controversy may even develop. It's all good for you, and it's good for the book, and for our nation-building process. The more praised and condemned the book is, the better, because it means that it is being read. And that is what you write a book for, to be read. That is what justifies the discipline and efforts that go into writing a serious book, which I strongly believe this book is. Where necessary and desirable, take note for the possibility of a second edition, when you can then give explanations as it may be necessary, and also react appropriately to praises and condemnations, and make corrections where required. You can now remain cool, calm, satisfied, fulfilled, and continue to thank God and praise God, your Creator, for all his blessings and mercies on you as on me. To God be the glory for all the good things he has done for you, for me, and for Nigeria. Yes, we are not where we should be as a nation, but it could be worse. And we should continue to pray that God should hasten good times to come. If I have been physically with you, my listening to the review of the book may give me one or two words to say as closing remarks. General Absalami Abubakar will be asked, with your approval, to sit in for me. My opening remarks can be read by him or projected on the screen as a recorded video. FG, we have come a long way. And we have come together. As a not young officer in the officers' mess in Kaduna, just doing what some of your predecessors have done, and all that we have done or gone through separately and together from that time until today, we must continually thank God. I especially thank God for your life, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. Continue to bask in the love and grace of God. Well done. And more grace to your elbow. That is supposed to have been read by General Abdusalami Abubakar. Now that I am physically here, you take it that he has read it on my behalf. Well done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Please, another round of applause for him. Honestly, the quintessential Chief Obasanjo, who spoke as if he was not.
Welcome, sir. It's lovely to see you. Welcome, sir. Elizabeth said to say hello.
This is the way you want, okay. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I have to begin by thanking General Ibrahim Babangida and the Board of Trustees of the IBB Presidential Library Foundation for the honor of the invitation to participate in this historic ceremony, outdooring General Babangida's long-awaited autobiography, and for the opportunity to speak at this event. I'm doubly honored to be present at this glittering assembly of Nigeria's who's who. The special guest of honor, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu Asiwaju, the current chair of ECOWAS, the sole survivor of ECOWAS's founding fathers and the victor of Nigeria's civil war, His Excellency General Yakubu Gowon, the first president of Nigeria's Third Republic, His Excellency President Olusegun Obasanjo, the godfather of all of Africa's former presidents and chair of the occasion, His Excellency President Abdul Salami Abubakar, the successful mediator of the Liberian Peace Accord, with whom I was proud to have been associated as Ghana's then foreign minister in hammering out the peace accord, which has brought about 2 decades of peace in Liberia. And the third president of Nigeria's Third Republic, the president with the felicitous name and current ECOWAS mediator of the Malian transition, His Excellency Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. I'm aware that there are many other outstanding Nigerians here, such as Vice Presidents Osibanjo, Atiku Abubakar, and others, as well as distinguished and celebrated entrepreneurs like Abdul Samad Rabiu and Aliko Dangote. I salute each one of you for the significant part you have played and continue to play in securing the stability and democratic development of Africa's greatest nation. The example of development in freedom that democratic Nigeria is providing to the continent is a compelling one, especially in this era of renewed turbulence in Africa. I have to take also the opportunity to acknowledge the President of the former leader of the Republic of Sierra Leone, President Ernest Bai Koroma, who made important contributions to the development of ECOWAS during his tenure. Your Excellencies, I've had the privilege of reading the manuscript of A Journey in Service before the launch today. And I want to congratulate warmly General Babangida for giving us such a fascinating account of a critical time in the history of Nigeria. Luckily for all of us, even though it is quite a heavy book, it is an easy read, which should retain the interest not only of who were alive during the times of the events recounted in the book, but also for those for whom it is very much history and folklore. As the General himself wrote in the very first sentence of the prologue, and I quote, "Over 3 decades have passed since the events described in the book," unquote. And I was ready to approach it as a history book in my frame of mind. There should not be many similarities, really, between the Nigeria of 1985 to 1992, with which the General grappled, and the Ghana of 2017 to 2025, where I have just finished being president after 2 successive terms. And even though 3 decades separate the 2 situations, it was interesting for me how often as I read the book, I came close to telling myself, plus ça change, plus ça reste la même chose. I lived through the years of regular coups d'etats and military rule around Africa, especially in our West African region. That did not make it any easier reading. The first-hand account of the man reputed to have been, and who admits to have been part of all previous government changes, and how he dealt with many coups d'etats that he faced while in charge. It is therefore reassuring that General Babangida can be so unambiguous in his support for democracy. He, after all, more than anyone, is best placed to pronounce on what some claim to be the advantages of military government, especially for developing nations in a hurry like us. He certainly demonstrates in his book that a military government indeed spends even more energy and resources on security considerations than an elected democratic one. Up till a few years ago, I would have said without any hesitation that after years of argument and experimentation, we have come to a consensus that multi-party democracy would be the most suitable form of governance structure for our continent, including West Africa. The regional grouping ECOWAS certainly thought that this consensus was accepted throughout its member states. And indeed, sanctions were spelled out for those countries that would succumb to military coups d'etats. I doubt that any of us was under any illusion that what we had all signed up to would be easy. But I was certain that all of us were ready to try to make it work. I feel a deep sense of disappointment that military coups d'etats have come back in fashion in our region and are seen as the answer to the instability being spread from the Sahel by jihadist activity, and by some as the answer to difficult economic conditions or unpopular government policies. It would appear that we have our work cut out for us all over again to try to build and consolidate the democratic structures in our countries to gain the confidence of our populations, especially to show that the road to prosperity will be faster and longer lasting when we are democratic. I'm not sure that back in 1985, when General Babangida became the leader of Nigeria, he and his colleagues had thought it out so clearly for themselves. But it would seem that somewhere along the line, or by the time it was over, as stated in the book, they had plans for a very brave new Nigeria. Permit me to quote him here, and forgive me for it is quite an extensive quote. There exists a world of difference between engineering a nation and ruling it. I never wished to rule Nigeria, and I never did it. My goal was to engineer it. The ultimate aim of engineering in the manner was precise. It chart a new course for a nation towards a new environment, consciously and carefully designed in anticipation of a future that can be understood, mastered, and managed. Engineering a nation is in reality in inventing the future. Everything has to be harnessed and focused. Resources, material resources, and moral resources all must be brought into play. Over and above all, the nation's psychology must be redirected and refocused. That was the dream. The reality was a daily grind of trying to keep a country united and together, fighting off attempts at coup d'etats and violent disagreements about the terms of economic policies. If anyone needed reminding, this was the time that the International Monetary Fund got its reputation, or maybe we should say notoriety, for the terms that came with giving assistance to a country. This book reminds us that the civilian constitutional government feels under constant threat of destabilization and having to spend far too much time and resources on security, and military government was under even more threat of insecurity. If the predictable problems of how to lift the bulk of the people from poverty and keep food prices down are overwhelming, they turn out to be far more tolerable when compared with the unpredictable things that hit a government in our part of the world. It is a difficult and exhausting process to come up with a plausible and workable foreign policy for an African country today. It was a bigger nightmare at the time described in A Journey in Service. Let us take our minds back, if we may, to the world in which General Ibrahim Babangida came to the leadership of Nigeria in the era of the two power blocs that operated and tried to dominate the world. In our part of the world, the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union and its ideological adherents, appropriated, quote, the progressive, unquote, tag, and tried to win hearts and minds and convince governments and populations that nations stood a better chance of rapid development by following the socialist path. Then there was the capitalist Western Bloc, led by America and its ideological advocates. They looked and felt more prosperous, and even though they carried the baggage of former colonial masters, they were more easily attractive to many segments of the population because people felt more comfortable as they were a known entity. The Eastern Bloc remained a largely unknown entity, where experts specialized in advising governments in Africa and other parts of the world how to interpret the distance between the ministers lined up on the days at an event in Moscow Square. A speech by a Nigerian leader on any subject will be carefully examined to make sure that there's nothing in it that might give the impression the country was leaning more to Washington. The only certainty for a self-respecting and self-confident African country was to take a strong anti-apartheid stance, which Nigeria had been doing since Murtala Mohammed's time in the mid-1970s, making a mark in the struggle towards the independence of the Portuguese colonies and Rhodesia. Today, it sounds almost romantic to hear people talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Empire. But if you were running a developing country at the time and suddenly had to maneuver through a world changing by the minute and sweeping all certainties away, you would not see the romance in the events, at least not at the time, when all our technocrats and advisors had suddenly had to find their way through the new realities that were emergent. Ladies and gentlemen, I was not president during those tumultuous times, but let me give you a recent example of the unpredictable turning of the fortunes of a government around completely. At the beginning of every year, the President of the Republic of Ghana, like many of his peers in other parts of the world, is obliged to present a statement to Parliament detailing the state of the nation. This statement invariably involves giving an accounting of how all aspects of life in the country are faring, and a detailed report on the various sectors of the economy. I'm taking us back to the beginning of the year 2020, which was the last year of my first term in office. When I got the first draft of the speech to be delivered to Parliament, the working title my staff came up with was "A Nation in Rude Health." Let me assure you that these were not people who dealt in trivialities. They were not boasting. They were not tempting fate. A nation in rude health was a fair assessment of what things looked like in Ghana and the state of affairs at the beginning of the year 2020. All our economic indicators were pointing in the